Everyone thinks they've seen California. They flew into LAX, they drove down the Sunset Strip, they took a photo at the Golden Gate Bridge, they went home and said they did California. And look, I understand. Those things exist, and they're real, and they're fine. But California is the most geographically diverse state in the entire country. In a single day, you can drive from below sea level to above 14,000 feet. You can stand in a desert that gets 2 inches of rain a year and be 2 hours from a redwood forest, so dense it blocks out the sky. You can be in a city of 4 million people, and 40 minutes later be completely alone on a cliff over the Pacific. The version of California that most people visit is maybe 8% of what's actually here. I have been through this state end to end, the mountains, the desert, the Central Valley, the coast, the far north, and I put together the definitive list. 30 places in California that will completely change what you think this state is. Let's go. Number 1, the ancient bristlecone pine forest, White Mountains. The oldest living things on the planet are in California, and almost nobody goes to see them. The ancient bristlecone pine forest in the White Mountains of the Eastern Sierra, accessible from the town of Bishop, contains trees that have been alive for over 5,000 years. Methuselah, the oldest confirmed living tree on Earth, is somewhere on this trail, and its exact location is kept secret to protect it. You walk through a forest of gnarled, wind-sculpted trees that were already ancient when the Egyptian pyramids were being built, and the silence and the elevation and the twisted beauty of these trees creates an experience that is unlike anything else available to a person in this country. The White Mountains rise over 14,000 feet directly across the Owens Valley from the Sierra Nevada, and the views of both ranges from the Bristlecone Forest Trail are extraordinary. This is one of the most profound outdoor experiences in California, and it sees a fraction of the traffic of Yosemite. Number 2, the Salton Sea. The largest lake in California is a mistake that became an ecosystem and then became a crisis, and is now one of the most surreal landscapes in the American West. The Salton Sea was created accidentally in 1905 when an irrigation canal broke and the Colorado River filled a below sea level basin for 2 years. It became a resort destination in the 1950s, then collapsed when the water grew too saline and too polluted for fish, and the resorts were abandoned. What remains is extraordinary and eerie. Collapsed infrastructure slowly sinking into salt-crusted shores, hundreds of thousands of migratory birds that still use the sea as a critical Pacific flyway stopover, tilapia skeletons bleached white on the beach, and a sky that turns violet and orange and red at sunset over water that nobody is swimming in. Bombay Beach, the abandoned resort town on the eastern shore, has been colonized by artists who have turned the ruins into an ongoing installation. This place is genuinely unlike anywhere else in the United States. Number 3, the Lost Coast, Humboldt County. The Lost Coast is the longest roadless stretch of coastline in the contiguous United States. 25 miles of Pacific coastline in Northern California that the state highway system bypassed entirely because the King Range Mountains rise too steeply from the ocean for road construction. You access it on foot, hiking the Lost Coast Trail with a pack, camping on black sand beaches, scrambling over headlands, timing your passage around tide windows that close off sections of the trail. Sea stacks rise from the surf. Roosevelt elk stand in the beach grass at the creek mouths. The town of Shelter Cove at the southern end of the trail is the only settlement on the entire stretch, and it has maybe 800 permanent residents. This is the California coast, the way it was before the Pacific Coast Highway arrived, and it is one of the great backpacking experiences in the American West. Number 4, Mono Lake Lee Vining. East of Yosemite on Highway 395, in a basin between the Sierra Nevada and the Great Basin Desert, sits one of the oldest lakes in North America, Mono Lake, 760,000 years old. Twice as salty as the ocean, and home to tufa towers that rise from the water like alien architecture. Tufa are calcium carbonate formations that grew underwater, where freshwater springs met the alkaline lake. and as the water level dropped, due to Los Angeles diverting its tributary streams for decades, they were exposed. Columns, spires, and knobby formations emerge from the lake surface in clusters that glow orange at sunrise and cast long reflections in the still water of early morning. 2.5 million migratory birds use Mono Lake annually as a feeding stop. The brine shrimp and alkali flies that live in the hypersaline water are extraordinarily energy-rich. Mono Lake is one of the most important migratory bird stopover sites in the Western Hemisphere, and one of the most otherworldly landscapes in California. If you're watching this and haven't subscribed yet, hit that button right now. Subscribe Epshiat1. This channel is built around finding the places that the algorithm buries and the guidebooks skip. One tap, let's keep going. Number 5, Channel Islands National Park. 5 islands off the Ventura coast that are sometimes called the Galapagos of North America. And that comparison is not an exaggeration. The Channel Islands have been separated from the mainland long enough to develop unique subspecies found nowhere else on Earth. The island fox, the island scrub jay, the island spotted skunk. The giant kelp forests surrounding the islands are among the most biodiverse marine environments in the world. Sea lions, harbor seals, blue whales, orca, giant sea bass, Garibaldi, all visible from a kayak or on a snorkeling trip in water that is cold and clear and full of life. Santa Cruz Island, the largest, has sea caves large enough to kayak through. Painted Cave is one of the largest sea caves in the world, 1,215 feet deep with a ceiling 160 feet high. And because you have to take a ferry to get there, the islands never feel crowded. 1 hour from Los Angeles and you are in genuine wilderness. Number 6, Lassen Volcanic National Park, the most underrated national park in California by a significant margin. Lassen is a hydrothermal wonderland in the northern Cascades. Boiling mud pots, steaming fumaroles, sulfur vents, and a volcano that actually erupted as recently as 1915, making it one of the most recently active volcanoes in the contiguous United States. The Bumpass Hell geothermal area is the largest hydrothermal area in the park, and the ground around the boardwalk hisses and bubbles and smells like the interior of the earth. The summit of Lassen Peak, a 5-mile round trip, gives you views of the Cascades in the Central Valley that on a clear day extend to Mount Shasta 75 miles north. And because Lassen sits between the tourist magnets of Crater Lake and Lake Tahoe, the vast majority of California visitors drive past it without stopping. The campgrounds are almost always available. The trails are almost always uncrowded. Use that. Number 7, the Anza Borrego Desert State Park, Borrego Springs. The largest state park in the contiguous United States, bigger than Rhode Island, is in the Colorado Desert east of San Diego, and it is one of the most dramatic desert landscapes in the American West. The Badlands of the Fonts Point area, reached by a rough dirt road, give you a 360-degree panoramic view of eroded clay formations in tan and rust and lavender that look nothing like any desert you've seen in photographs. In winter and spring, the wildflower blooms here, when sufficient rainfall produces them, are among the most spectacular in the country. Entire hillsides of desert sunflowers, sand verbena, and ocotillo in bloom, turning the desert from brown to yellow and purple and orange. And Borrego Springs, the small community at the park's center, has scattered enormous metal sculptures by Ricardo Breccietta throughout the desert. Dinosaurs, sea creatures, a serpent half buried in the sand, that appear without warning as you drive the park roads. It is completely surreal and completely free. Number 8, the Lava Beds National Monument, Modoc County. A landscape of lava tube caves, cinder cones, and shield volcanoes in the far north of California that also happens to be the site of one of the most significant Native American military engagements in American history. The Modoc War of 1872 to 1873 was fought in this lava field, where a band of 53 Modoc fighters under Captain Jack held off the U.S. Army for 5 months in the natural fortifications of the lava beds. The cave system at Lava Beds is extraordinary. Over 700 lava tubes mapped, ranging from crawlways to rooms large enough to stand and walk through. Mushbot Cave is lit and self-guided. The backcountry caves require a helmet and a headlamp and the willingness to crawl through absolute darkness, and they are extraordinary. This is one of the most geologically and historically significant places in California, and it sees almost no tourist traffic. Number 9. Point Reyes National Seashore, Marin County. An hour north of San Francisco, a peninsula of coastal wilderness that exists because of one of the most significant geological accidents in North America. Point Reyes sits on the Pacific Plate, while the land immediately east of it sits on the North American Plate, separated by the San Andreas Fault. The two sides of the fault moved 20 feet relative to each other in the 1906's earthquake, and the fence line visible at the Bear Valley trailhead that was torn apart by that movement is still there, preserved and offset. The Toole elk herd at Tamal's Point, the elephant seal colony at Drake's Beach during winter pupping season, the lighthouse at the tip of the peninsula that's battered by the foggiest coast in California. Point Reyes is the kind of place where every trail gives you something unexpected, and every visit feels different from the last. Number 10. Death Valley National Park. The hottest, driest, lowest place in North America is also one of the most beautiful. That is not a contradiction, it is a geological fact. Badwater Basin, the lowest point in the Western Hemisphere, at 282 feet below sea level, is a vast salt flat that reflects the light of the mountains above it in patterns that shift by the hour. Mesquite flat sand dunes are what everyone imagines when they imagine a desert. Artist's Palette, a hillside of volcanic and mineral deposits that runs through shades of pink, green, yellow, and purple, looks hand-painted. Zabriskie Point at sunrise, with its eroded badlands glowing gold, and the valley floor below still in shadow, is one of the great photographic moments available in the American West. And in the rare years when sufficient winter rain falls, the Death Valley Superbloom produces wildflower carpets across the valley floor that photographers plan their entire year around. Death Valley is not a place to endure, it is a place to understand. You're 10 places in and you are still here. Subscribe right now. Subscribe Beesjits 2, hit the bell, because places 11 through 20 are where this list gets genuinely extraordinary. Let's keep going. Number 11. The Redwood National and State Parks, Del Norte County. The tallest living things on Earth are in Northern California, and standing next to one of them rearranges something fundamental in your understanding of scale. Coast redwoods grow to over 380 feet, taller than a 35-story building, and the oldest ones alive today were already mature trees when the Roman Empire was at its height. The Tall Trees Grove in Redwood National Park requires a permit and a key from the visitor center, which limits daily access and means you walk through the world's tallest forest in near complete solitude. The Fern Canyon and Prairie Creek Redwoods State Park, a narrow canyon with walls completely covered in fives ferns, filmed by Steven Spielberg for The Lost World, is one of the most otherworldly environments in the United States. And the Avenue of the Giants, a 31-mile stretch of old highway through old-growth redwood, is one of the great American drives for the simple reason that nothing you have seen before prepares you for what it looks like to drive through trees of this size. Number 12. Alabama Hills Lone Pine. The granite formations in the Alabama Hills below Mount Whitney have been the backdrop for over 400 movies and television shows. Every classic Western you've seen, John Ford's cavalry films, recent blockbusters. Because the rocks and the peaks and the light create a landscape that looks like the American imagination of the West more than the West actually does. The movie road loop takes you through the most famous formations, and the Mobius Arch frames Mount Whitney, the highest peak in the contiguous United States at 14,505 feet, in a natural rock window that is one of the most photographed compositions in California. And Lone Pine itself, the small town at the base of the Sierra, has a film history museum that contextualizes the landscape in a way that makes standing in it significantly more interesting. Number 13, the Carrizo Plain National Monument, San Luis Obispo County. The largest remaining native grassland in California is in the rain shadow of the Coast Ranges, a long, flat valley where the San Andreas Fault runs visibly along the surface. You can see the fault scarp from the road, a clear, linear feature running for miles across the plain. Soda Lake, an alkaline playa in the center of the monument, turns white as it evaporates and pink when certain algae bloom in it. Tule elk and pronghorn antelope, both nearly extinct in California a century ago, and both recovered to viable populations, roam the plain. And in exceptional wildflower years, the Carrizo Plain produces blooms of goldfields, owl's clover, and phacelia that stretch across the valley floor in color so saturated it looks like a film filter. This is the California that existed before the farms and the freeways, and it is one of the most significant ecological landscapes remaining in the state. Number 14, the Farallon Islands, San Francisco. You cannot visit the Farallons. They are a federally designated wilderness closed to the public, but you can see them on a pelagic birding and whale watching trip from San Francisco Bay. And what happens around these islands is extraordinary enough to justify the boat ride. The Farallons are 27 miles west of the Golden Gate Bridge in the open Pacific, and they are one of the largest seabird nesting colonies in the contiguous United States. Hundreds of thousands of common murres, tufted puffins, Cassin's auklets, rhinoceros auklets, and western gulls. The waters around the islands are one of the prime hunting grounds for great white sharks in the world. The white shark population that congregates here in fall to prey on the northern elephant seal colony has been studied for decades and is one of the most accessible wild white shark populations on the planet. Pelagic trips from San Francisco in fall regularly observe hunting behavior, breaching, and seal predation from the boat. This is wildlife watching that most people don't know is available an hour from one of the largest cities in America. Number 15, Bodie State Historic Park, Bridgeport. The best preserved ghost town in the American West sits at 8,375 feet in the eastern Sierra, buried under snow for much of the year and accessible by a dirt road for the rest of it. Bodie was a gold mining boomtown of 10,000 people in the 1880s, with 65 saloons, a red light district, a Chinatown, and a murder rate that newspapers of the era described as a daily occurrence. Today, 200 buildings remain in a state of what the park calls arrested decay, maintained exactly as they were found, not restored, not staged. You walk through a town that has been empty for 80 years and everything is still there. Furniture in the houses, bottles on the bar, a child's shoe under a bed. The mining equipment stands where it stopped. Bodie is the most haunted feeling place in California without a single ghost story needing to be manufactured, because the reality of 10,000 lives that simply stopped is haunting enough. Number 16, the Tule Lake National Wildlife Refuge and the internment sites, Modoc County, in the same remote corner of far northern California, as the lava beds is one of the most historically significant and least visited landscapes in the American West. Tule Lake was the largest and most heavily guarded of the Japanese-American internment camps of World War II, at its peak holding 18,000 people, and the remnants of the camp, including the original jail building, are accessible and interpreted. The wildlife refuge that surrounds the site is simultaneously one of the most important wetlands in the Pacific Flyway. In November, the concentration of waterfowl and raptors here is staggering, with up to a million ducks and geese moving through, and the largest concentration of bald eagles outside Alaska wintering in the surrounding farmland. This place holds two entirely separate and extraordinary stories, and it holds both of them in the same landscape simultaneously. Number 17, the McWay Falls and Julia Pfeiffer Burns State Park, Big Sur. Big Sur is already on most California itineraries, but most people drive through it without stopping at the place that rewards stopping the most. The McWay Falls at Julia Pfeiffer Burns State Park is an 80-foot waterfall that drops directly onto a pristine cove beach. A beach with no access, no path down, no way to get to it, only visible from the overlook trail above. You stand on the cliff and look down at turquoise water, a white sand arc, and an 8-foot waterfall pouring directly onto it. And the inaccessibility is part of what makes it extraordinary. The cove is perfectly framed by the headlands on both sides. In winter, gray whales pass through the kelp canopy, visible from the bluffs. This is the California coastline at its most dramatic and most pure. Number 18. The Alabama Hills at dusk with Mount Whitney at golden hour. You've heard about the Alabama Hills during the day. Here's what almost nobody does. Arrive in late afternoon, drive the movie road loop in the last 2 hours before sunset, and stay until the light is gone. At golden hour, the granite boulders turn from tan to warm gold to deep orange, while Mount Whitney above them catches the alpenglow. A phenomenon where the sunlit summit above the shadow line turns pink, then rose, then deep red as the sun drops below the western horizon. The light lasts minutes and changes every second, and it is one of the great photographic opportunities in the American West. Then stay for dark. The Owens Valley has minimal light pollution and the Milky Way above the Alabama Hills formations. The same sky that John Ford's camera crew saw in the 1940s is extraordinary. Number 19, the Salinas Valley and Steinbeck Country, Monterey County. John Steinbeck grew up in Salinas and wrote the Central Valley's agricultural landscape into the American literary canon. And the physical reality of that landscape, the long flat valley, the Gabilan Mountains to the east, the fog coming over the Santa Lucia Range from the coast, is still exactly as he described it. The National Steinbeck Center in Salinas is one of the finest author museums in the country, and the agricultural communities of the valley floor have a food culture. Farm stands, taquerias, roadside produce that is extraordinary and almost entirely unknown outside the region. The drive from Salinas to Carmel over the Carmel Valley Road gives you the full geography of Steinbeck's imagination. The dry inland valley, the hills, and then suddenly the Pacific. It is one of the great short drives in California for anyone who has read of Mice and Men or East of Eden and wants to stand in the actual landscape. Number 20, Joshua Tree National Park. Two deserts meet at Joshua Tree. The higher, cooler Mojave to the north and the lower, hotter Colorado Desert to the south. And the boundary between them is one of the most dramatic ecological transitions visible from a road anywhere in the country. The Cholla Cactus Garden, where thousands of teddy bear cholla cover a south-facing slope, glows gold in low-angle light in a way that looks computer-generated. The Skull Rock Nature Trail moves through a boulder landscape that was shaped by a geological process called spheroidal weathering over millions of years. Rainwater percolating along fracture lines, slowly rounding the corners of massive monzogranite blocks until they stack like enormous eggs. The climbing here is world-class. Joshua Tree is one of the premier sport climbing destinations in the country, and even non-climbers watching the routes from the road get a sense of the scale of the rock and the dark sky. Joshua Tree is a certified International Dark Sky Park, and the star viewing here, 2 hours from Los Angeles, is one of the most accessible astronomy experiences in California. 20 places in and you are absolutely still here. Subscribe right now. Subscribe 3 bell on, because the last 10 places are the California that almost nobody has on their list. These are the ones. Let's finish this. Number 21, the Modoc Plateau and Surprise Valley, Modoc County. The far northeastern corner of California, the part that exists in a different time zone of consciousness from the rest of the state, is a high desert plateau of volcanic tablelands, alkali lakes, and hot springs that almost no one from California has ever visited. Surprise Valley is separated from the rest of Modoc County by the Warner Mountains and contains 3 alkali lakes, upper, middle, and lower alkali, that shift from blue to green to pink depending on algae concentration and season. The natural hot springs on the valley floor are free and undeveloped, concrete, or rock tubs fed by geothermal water where you soak under a sky with no light pollution. Modoc National Wildlife Refuge in the valley has exceptional birding, sandhill cranes, white-faced ibis, avocets, white pelicans. This is a landscape with almost no tourist infrastructure and almost no tourist traffic, and it is genuinely beautiful. Number 22, the Glass Beach, Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg on the Mendocino coast used to dump its trash directly onto the beach below the town bluffs, a practice common throughout coastal California, until it was banned in the 1960s. The ocean has spent the subsequent decades tumbling and folding the glass, pottery, and ceramic fragments that remained, and what washed back up is a beach covered in smooth, translucent sea glass in every color: emerald green, cobalt blue, amber, milk white, rare red, in densities that no other beach in the world can match. It is one of the most photogenic beaches in California, for reasons that are entirely accidental and entirely impossible to replicate. Glass Beach State Park now protects it, and collecting is prohibited, which means the supply stays constant and the beach looks essentially the same every time. The Mendocino headlands just south, the town of Mendocino, perched on a bluff above the Pacific, are among the most beautiful coastal landscapes in Northern California. Number 23, the Mono Hot Springs, Sierra National Forest. Remote enough to require a significant drive up a narrow mountain road, but accessible enough by car for anyone willing to make the commitment. Mono Hot Springs Resort sits at 6,500 feet in the Sierra Nevada on the San Joaquin River and has been operating since 1934. A small collection of cabins and a bathhouse fed by natural geothermal springs where the water temperature is regulated by mixing with the cold river. The area around it has excellent trout fishing, day hikes into the Ansel Adams Wilderness, and access to Lake Edison, a high Sierra reservoir reached by a ferry that runs in summer. The combination of hot spring soaking and high alpine sceneries in a setting that has changed little in 90 years is the specific California experience that residents of the Central Valley have known about for generations, and that almost nobody else has found. Number 24, the Marin Headlands Golden Gate National Recreation Area. Across the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco is one of the most underused green spaces in the Bay Area. 15,000 acres of coastal headlands, former military installations, and wildlife corridors that give you views of San Francisco, the Bay, the Pacific, and the bridge itself from angles that no tourist map shows. The Point Bonita Lighthouse, reached by a narrow path and a suspension's footbridge over a sea cave, is the most dramatically situated lighthouse in California. The Marine Mammal Center, a hospital for injured sea lions and elephant seals, gives you access to marine mammals at close range in a conservation context. The Nike missile sites from the Cold War are preserved and interpreted by rangers in uniform, and the coastal trail north to Tennessee Valley gives you a 3-mile walk to a beach backed by lagoon that sees a fraction of the traffic of any Marin beach accessible by road. San Francisco exists 1 mile away. None of this feels like it. Number 25. The Chumash Painted Cave, Santa Barbara. On a narrow mountain road above Santa Barbara, a small cave holds one of the finest examples of Chumash rock art in existence. A series of polychrome paintings in red, black, and white depicting beings, celestial symbols, and abstract patterns that scholars believe are connected to a solar eclipse that occurred in 1677. The cave is gated, but the paintings are visible through the iron bars from the roadside entrance. The quality and preservation of the pigment, sheltered from weather for centuries in the sandstone interior, is extraordinary. The colors remain vivid, and the detail in the figures is precise. It is a 3-minute stop on a mountain drive that most Santa Barbara visitors never take, and it is a direct visual connection to the sophisticated culture of a people who lived in this landscape for 10,000 years before anyone else arrived. Number 26. The Trona Pinnacles, San Bernardino County. In the Mojave Desert near the town of Trona, one of the most remote and economically difficult communities in California, A field of tufa spires rises from a dry lake bed that was once an ancient sea. The Trona pinnacles are over 500 calcium carbonate formations, ranging from a few feet to 140 feet tall, covering 5 square miles of the China Lake Basin. They formed underwater 10,000 to 100,000 years ago and were exposed when the lake dried. The landscape looks like a science fiction film set, which is why it has been used as one in dozens of productions. At sunrise or sunset, the pinnacles cast long shadows across the playa, and the light turns them from gray to gold to deep orange. The road in is unpaved and occasionally requires a high-clearance vehicle. There is no fee, no ranger station, no interpretive signage, and no cell service. You are entirely on your own in one of the strangest landscapes in California. Number 27. The Sonoma Coast and Salt Point State Park. North of Bodega Bay, the Sonoma Coast becomes genuinely rugged. Craggy headlands, sea stacks, surge channels, and windswept bluffs that look more like the coast of Ireland than the California of the postcards. Salt Point State Park has a marine reserve around its rocky shoreline, and the tide pools here are among the richest in California. Sea stars, chitons, hermit crabs, anemones, abalone shells. The pygmy forest at Salt Point, a strange ecosystem where centuries of leached acidic soil have stunted the bishop pine and coast cypress to under 10 feet, despite being fully mature trees, is one of the most disorienting forest walks in the state. The combination of dramatic coast, tide pool ecology, and bizarre forest in a park that draws a fraction of the traffic of Point Reyes makes the Sonoma Coast one of the most rewarding day trips from the Bay Area. Number 28. The Eastern Sierra and the Mammoth Lakes Basin. The eastern face of the Sierra Nevada is significantly more dramatic than the western face. Instead of the long, gradual slope that gives Yosemite its valley, the eastern Sierra rises almost vertically from the Owens Valley floor, gaining over 10,000 feet of elevation in 10 horizontal miles. The Mammoth Lakes Basin is at the center of this landscape, a caldera system that is technically still geologically active, surrounded by volcanic features, including the Devil's Postpile National Monument, where a formation of perfectly hexagonal basalt columns stands 60 feet tall, like a pipe organ built by geology. The Rainbow Falls below Devil's Postpile drops 101 feet into a pool that catches the spray, and an afternoon light produces a double rainbow in the mist almost every clear day. The Mammoth Lakes themselves, 5 lakes connected by trails in a basin above 8,000 feet, are some of the most beautiful accessible alpine lakes in the Sierra. Number 29. The Huntington Library and Gardens San Marino. This one is different from everything else on the list, and it belongs here. The Huntington is a research institution with one of the finest art collections in California. A Gutenberg Bible, the Blue Boy by Gainsborough, Pinky by Lawrence, original manuscripts of Chaucer, Shakespeare, and Lincoln. But the reason to go is the 120 acres of botanical gardens that surround it. The Japanese garden, the desert garden, with 5,000 species of succulents. The Chinese garden with its lake and tea house. The rose garden with over 1,100 varieties. Each section is a complete world. The desert garden in particular, laid out in 1905, and now containing the largest collection of mature cacti and succulents in the world, is one of the most unusual and beautiful garden landscapes in the country. This is Southern California operating at a level of cultural and horticultural ambition that most visitors to the region never discover because it is not on the beach and it is not in Hollywood. Number 30, the Palomar Mountain Observatory and the Drive Up. You end this list the way you started it, looking at the sky. The Hale telescope at Palomar Observatory was the largest telescope in the world from 1948 to 1976, and it is still operational, still producing scientific data, and still open for daytime tours. The drive up Palomar Mountain from the valley floor, through oak woodland, then chaparral, then conifer forest, is one of the best mountain drives in Southern California. The observatory dome sits in a meadow at 5,600 feet and the white structure against the blue mountain sky is one of the great photographs available in this part of the state. The museum inside tells the complete story of the Hale telescope's construction, a project that took 20 years and required one of the most complex pieces of precision engineering ever attempted. And the scale of the instrument when you stand beneath it in the dome is genuinely staggering. And the drive back down at sunset, with the Palomar Valley spread below you in golden light, and the Pacific visible on clear days at the horizon, is the specific California feeling that this list was always building toward. Here is your assignment. Pick 3 places from this list right now, not the whole list. 3. Write them in the comments. That comment is a commitment you are making to yourself in public, and the research on commitment devices is consistent. You are significantly more likely to follow through when you write it down. And when you've done your 3, and come back and tell me what happened. I want to know if the bristlecone pines changed your sense of time. I want to know if a sea lion looked you in the eye at the Channel Islands. I want to know if the Marfa lights showed up. Wait, wrong state. I want to know if the McWay Falls was everything. These are the stories worth having. If you are still here at the end of this video, you already know this channel is exactly for you. Subscribe right now. Subscribe for hit the bell, and go watch the next video right here, which covers the 30 best places in New York State. Because everyone thinks New York State is New York City, and almost nobody has seen what's actually up there. I'll see you there.